Are you ready to discover how automation can transform the financial landscape? Well, as the UK tech IPO market is showing signs of revival here in the UK, there have been many recent discussions around potential listings like Raspberry Pi on the London Stock Exchange, and these headlines mean the role of finance teams have never been more crucial. And today I'm joined by the president of a company called Tipalti, and he brings with him a wealth of knowledge on how automating financial processes can not only streamline operations but also pave the way for successful IPOs. So Robert is going to join me on the podcast today. He's going to shed light on the transformative effects of reducing manual workload through automation, enhancing compliance, and ultimately improving financial visibility. All of these things, of course, are essential for any company that's gearing up to go public. Before we get today's guest on, I want to talk about the fact that defence contractors face immense pressure to comply with something called CMMC 2.0 security standards. And finding a secure, easy-to-use file-sharing solution meeting those guidelines can be a major challenge. The federal government and federal systems integrators supporting the Department of Defence have similar compliance requirements for improving cybersecurity and data protection too. So if you are an IT admin in the defence sector, if you are tired of juggling complex security solutions, Kiteworks offers a game-changing approach to CMMC 2.0 compliance because their centralised policy management simplifies administration across the entire platform. What that means is no more productivity disruptions or difficult user training. They've done the heavy lifting with their FedRAMP authorisation, so you don't have to. And yes, while other solutions complicate your workflow, Kiteworks streamlines it. So upgrade to Kiteworks and experience the perfect blend of security and simplicity. So if you're interested in accelerating your CMMC 2.0 compliance and begin addressing federal zero trust requirements with Kiteworks' universal secure file sharing platform made for defence contractors, simply visit kiteworks.com to get started, where you can learn more about this secure content platform for CMMC compliance. But now it's time to return to our regularly scheduled programming and welcome today's guest onto the mic. So buckle up and hold on tight, because no matter where you're listening in the world right now, it's time for me to take your ears on a journey to San Francisco, where today's guest is waiting to join me. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, my name's Robert Israch. I am the president of Tipalti. I help run the business, of course, and mostly focused on growth. So my background's marketing throughout my career, but I oversee the customer operation, marketing, sales, and everything in between, basically the buyer to the customer journey for the business.
And if there is anybody listening in any corner of the world that's not heard of Tipalti, how would you describe it to someone hearing about you for the first time?
Yeah, so we make finance automation technology. We focus on your fast-growing tech and innovator companies, often mid-sized companies, scaling, scale-ups, and the such like that. But we essentially automate your manual back-office finance operations, everything from accounts payable to paying suppliers across the world, expenses, cards, procurement, all those processes that are necessary to scale a business, but burdens in terms of, throwing headcount at them and distractions from actually growing the business and scaling the company globally across the world. We kind of take care of that so the business can focus on what they actually want to do and their mission and achieving their growth goals.
Well, there's so much I want to talk with you about today, because although there is nearly 5,000 miles distance between us and a whole lot of sea, there's so much in common with the US and the UK, and there's economic uncertainty all around the world, of course. And I am an eternal optimist. I like to think that things are going to improve, but let's have a fresh pair of eyes here. So with the UK's tech IPO market, it's showing signs of recovery, but how do you see the role of finance teams evolving to support this resurgence? What are you seeing here?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've all learned across the world, and I just moved back from London last August. I was in London for the last 3 years building out Tipalti's Europe business. And like you said, there's a lot of commonalities, a lot of differences, but I think everyone across the world has been dealing with this kind of recessionary mindset, and in particular, a new way to measure business performance and not to only focus on growth, but kind of this balance between growth, profitability, sustainability, efficiency that we all have to strike. And I think that balance is a tricky modification for everyone to make. I think all companies across all regions are making those modifications and such like that, but it's a challenge, and finance is key to that, right? At the point where it was purely about just pure growth and your evaluations and your IPOs and your kind of path to success and funding was purely on growth. Finance is important, but a little less. They're based kind of getting the numbers and doing the forecasting at this point, when the standard's a lot higher, where you have to not only grow at a certain clip, but you have to do it in a way with good payback and good profitability and more accurate forecasting. The stock markets or the investors are holding companies to a higher standard. Finance is absolutely critical to forecasting the business accurately forward, working more closely with the business to control spend, getting better visibility into performance, guiding the CEO to make not only the right decisions in terms of growth, but the right decisions for a sustainable business. So finance, I think, has a much more important seat at the table. In order to have a more important seat at the table, they have to get out of all the kind of operational work that runs the day-to-day, so that they can focus their resources, time, additional headcount in the right places that the business demands. So it's putting more pressure on finance. That puts more pressure on finance to focus their people on the right activities.
And I'm so glad you raised that, because I suspect anyone working in an office anywhere in the world, or indeed inside corporate America, they would have come across some frustrating old school traditional manual processes that just seem to be so slow and out of touch with a fast moving world at the moment. But for what you're seeing, can you elaborate on some of those specific manual processes that I'm alluding to there that cause those problems, those frustrations, and how ultimately they're impacting a company's growth and financial management?
Yeah, there's a lot of them. So that's the reality of them. When you actually survey finance leaders, CFOs, finance directors, controllers, and such on what those are, accounts payable is typically the number one most time-consuming function in finance. It takes literally 41 minutes, based on our research, 41 minutes to just process an invoice. And processing invoice is only one of the chevrons or processes, if you will, in accounts payable. There's, onboarding suppliers, there's paying suppliers, there's monthly close, which is, of course, tied very closely to the accounts payable process, because that's where you're getting the spend and payment reconciliation. So those are the biggest single process within accounts payable is the most important time-consuming function in finance. Secondly, in that process is finance monthly close, and payment reconciliation, of course, is one of the biggest inputs into that close process. Within accounts payable specifically, there's multiple processes in there that I've alluded to, but it starts with invoice processing and approvals. If you have a PO matching or procurement process, that flows right into that process as well. The second part of it is actually the paying and then the reconciliation of the invoices. That process also burdensome, particularly if you have several different payment methods, particularly if you're paying people in multiple different countries and in different currencies. That all becomes more of a headache. And particularly if you have more subsidiaries and entities around the world as well, that only amplifies that challenge there. And then, of course, the monthly close, which everything I just mentioned ties into the monthly close. But that's where you get the business visibility. Like we talked about spend visibility and business visibility. It starts with your financial statements and closing the monthly books fast, right? And you can't do that if you don't have those 1 and 2 processes I just mentioned done efficiently and rapidly and accurately.
And I was just going to say, listening to you there, I was getting flashbacks from my former corporate life of chasing down an invoice that's stuck in authorization because somebody is on, I don't know, holiday, taking a sabbatical, or recently left the company, and everything grinds to a halt. And then there's the month end where nobody dare approach finance because you just get those words, it's month end, leave us alone, kind of thing. So how crucial is an efficient financial operation for companies, especially if they are thinking about something big like an IPO? What role does automation play in streamlining some of those processes?
Yeah, if you're approaching an IPO, or even if you're not approaching an IPO, but you're starting to mature your business, you're going to have audits, you're going to have fraud, You're going to have requirements around controls and regulatory and the side. You're going to have a process here that's scalable, repeatable, accurate, that has built-in security to make sure that you don't have fraud, that your auditors are pleased, that you can close your books accurately and timely way. And the automation, any good automation system in this space has to have pretty robust capabilities here, signatory rights, tax form, VAT, and tax ID collection by jurisdiction and the such like that. Ideally, it's got some AI built in where it's looking for fraud patterns proactively for your business and the such. But these capabilities, any good automation system has that built right in. And then, of course, it all flows to payment reconciliation again, which ties to that monthly close, which, of course, is kind of key to being able to grow a company and be audited and go IPO and predict and forecast the business accurately. So controls are absolutely essential, and any robust automation that scales with you over the course of time has to have that built in throughout all these different processes. Just like basics is you're supposed to have best in class, like every 101 about finance, you're supposed to have a separate invoice approval workflow and payment approval workflow. It's a way to control fraud, right? And most companies don't, frankly. They have invoice approval workflow and then it's just a payment. And many systems, frankly, don't have that capability. And then some of these approval workflows are manual, right? And it's people slacking each other or, sending emails or even paper and the such like that. That won't, pass the muster of a grown-up company with expectations on, controls. And you don't want to get into situations that are put in the media and the such like that with, people gaming the system, whether internal or external. You have to have monitors for all these things and have paper trails, ideally digital, right?
Yeah, and of course, what we're talking about here are universal problems. It doesn't matter where people are listening, they're going to have similar stories to what we're talking about here. So what would you say are the common barriers that finance leaders are facing when adopting automation, and how are these challenges being effectively addressed? I mean, we've managed to go some time on a tech podcast without mentioning AI, but now that is in the conversation, things are going to be happening much faster. But what is stopping people?
Yeah, I think this is a status quo situation. Accounts payable has been largely run in this more manual way for the past, 50 years. And so, and so a lot of it is just picking their eyes up and looking at the process and saying, does it need to be done this way? Is there a better way? Is there a more scalable way? Is there a more efficient way? Is there a way with better controls and the such? And just at least exploring what options are out there. And nowadays, with the evolution of tech, including things like AI, machine learning, automation, technology, there are better ways for sure to do this. So it starts with learning. We do have research from finance leaders on what their top challenges are, regarding automating and modernizing the accounts payable function. A lot of it kind of comes down to that status quo thing we just talked about. But the number one item was skills training. The reality is on that, well, I'll go through the list first, but skills training is the first, and a little bit of kind of tied into that is change, right? And a lot of this is about embracing change to some degree. Of course, there's a shopping process. The second most common challenge is the need to find appropriate tools and vendors. So it's just the process of exploring, shopping, and then figuring out how to evaluate. So concerns about the complexity of automation, both how do you implement it, and then how to use it, how do you teach new employees to use it, and then the fourth is actually just not knowing where to start. How do you evaluate these vendors? How do you look at them and the such like that? So those are the challenges, but it really is that idea of, look, if you're a finance leader, you have to scale your entire business effectively. You have to support the business in a more strategic way to guide them to make better decisions. You have to free your people's time up. You also have to retain your talent. And most talent nowadays does not want to be doing data entry in a backwards way. They need to actually build their skills and their own futures and the such. And you won't be able to retain talent if you don't give them the right experience and give them learnings and the such. So it starts with the finance leaders kind of accepting that they've got to make changes to their function to scale their own function, but also to support the business. On the vendor side, it's up to the vendor to help. Many of those things I just talked about is about the the vendors partnering with prospects or with companies and finance leaders to help guide them through the process, to help them understand what they need to evaluate and such. Generally speaking, ease of use is written all over that. Like the process of buying should be relatively easy, should be a good experience. It's a reflection of the customer experience you'll get later if you select one of those vendors. They should be able to guide you on what are the right things to look at and consider as you're evaluating software. But the technology should be relatively easy to implement. It should be relatively easy to use. It should be modern, similar to using Facebook or, an app on your phone to some degree. Of course, this stuff is complex. So it's going to be more complex than Facebook, but it doesn't need to be that hard to learn. And when you hire a new employee, they should be able to intuitively understand how to navigate the software. And then, of course, it's got to have the robust capability, the mix of depth and breadth necessary, not only for your business today, but as you grow and your business changes and becomes more complex, that it should be able to grow with your company as you keep growing. Maybe you add more entities and subsidiaries. Maybe you have more control requirements and audit requirements. Maybe you have different tax regimes you have to deal with and the such. But the system should be able to grow, and that should be part of the assessment of, is it easy to implement? Is it easy to use? But also, does it have the capabilities you need today? And will it scale and grow with you tomorrow? And then, of course, provide that spend visibility and insight and that monthly close acceleration necessary that your business and your board and your executive team will require.
And if we were to park the buzzwords for a moment, AI, machine learning and automation, every new tech project is now judged on, hey, what business value is it going to offer and generate? What's the ROI on that expensive tech project?
100%.
So in what ways can automating end-to-end AP processes add that strategic value to finance teams, particularly in the context of preparing for an IPO, but also just in general, just to hammer home that point, that the value that it can bring?
Yeah. So a good automation technology, everything is ROI these days, right? Even more so than it was 2 or 3 years ago. It's not just to get the latest technology because it's cool or seems nice. I think finance buyers were never of that mindset, but maybe, of course, they're influenced by everyone around them and the such. And so more so now than ever, it's about ROI. The typical ROI should be able to expect for a good automation technology, including finance automation or accounts payable automation. Firstly, it's workload reduction. So can it clear out enough work where, one, your current finance staff can focus on what you need your finance staff and your larger team around the finance staff to focus on. Typical workload reduction around if done right, is 50 to 80% workload reduction around AP, which is the most time-consuming function in finance, bar none, right? That's very consistent. So you take the most time-consuming function, you automate it 50 to 80%. It won't be 100%. There's definitely things that humans have to do to embrace and make sure the process is working correctly over the course of time. But that's fairly significant if you can automate 80% of the time your current team is spending. Many teams are spending 40 hours a week on these processes, depending on your structure and the such. But it's around 40 hours a week that you often are spending on various related accounts payable, expenses, and procurement processes. So it's a pretty significant amount of time you're talking about automating. So that's one. When you're automating your finance staff, you're also avoiding future headcount that you have to hire. We have many clients who were about to hire additional staff in accounts payable or in procurement or other functions, and they were able to avoid some of this ongoing future headcount hiring and hire people in other functions of the business that led to growth, both in finance and other functions. So headcount reduction is part of that. More future headcount reduction versus current, but headcount avoidance is part of that ROI equation. Then there's risks and controls. We talked about fraud reduction, better spend visibility, better spend controls, audit controls, tax compliance controls, regulatory controls, and the such. As a second piece, it's softer, right? It's hard to calculate exactly what your fraud controls are, but as you get bigger, you're going to have this auditable flow in the system, and that better spend visibility obviously leads then to better business decision-making, better forecasting and such, which is where finance really needs to spend more of the time on over the course of time. But on the hard costs, it's that workload reduction lead to the biggest payback. And then, of course, you're improving controls, including improving spend visibility with that faster monthly close. Usually monthly close accelerates by 25% with the right system in place. So you're getting that financial reporting faster for the business to make better business decisions. And then if you're really doing this properly, you now have real-time view of your accounts payable spend, your procurement spend, your expenses spend, your card spend across the business, which obviously leads to better controls of your spend in the company.
100%. And just to bring to life what we're talking about here, are you able to share any examples or use cases or client stories of how your solutions have maybe helped companies overcome those manual process challenges, the journey that you took them on, and ultimately improve their IPO readiness too?
Yeah, sure. I'll give a few examples. One, for example, Spitfire Audio. They're a music tech company based in London. They make virtual instrument sample libraries for music production. But they had pretty outdated manual process around managing their royalty payments to the business. They ended up reducing their royalty payment run from 6 weeks to 30 minutes. So that's a little bit more than 80% actually. So, so that gives you a sense. They automate about 1,500 global payments a month. So pretty significant scale there. And ended up saving about 10 weeks of payment workload per year. So fairly significant type of savings from that perspective. Another example, School of Life. They're a multimedia company around education. They reduced their AP workload by about 50%. They actually avoided an additional full-time finance headcount through the automation process. So that's a fairly significant savings on that side. And they just streamlined the integrations with other systems. Finance automation will tie into an ERP system. They're really two different, capabilities that, but they do need to speak with one another. Also, you won't get that whole overall finance workflow right. And so that specific company kind of integrated with a well-known ERP NetSuite. So they were able to kind of tie in that process as well. So those are a few kind of, I could rattle on about various things, but typically it's at that 50 to 80% workload reduction, much more advanced controls, faster monthly close. It's fairly consistent in terms of the output you see. And then the longer term value is of course that better spend visibility and their better business visibility, faster, better, more accurate. And then the risk and fraud controls that come along with it.
And as you were casually dropping some powerful stats there, I suspect there'll be a few CFOs thinking, okay, now you've got my attention. So what advice would you give to those CFOs and finance leaders who are maybe have been hesitant to adopt automation due to concerns about skills gaps or suitability or the headache that it might cause, etc.? And they're right at the beginning of that journey. Any advice that you would offer those people?
I would generally say it doesn't hurt to research, right? At minimum, you'll educate yourself on what's out there. You'll learn the pros and cons, what optionality, what technology is out there. So it doesn't hurt to explore. And there's, multiple people, whether it's consultants and or vendors, who can kind of help you through that kind of journey. But exploring doesn't hurt, doesn't cost any money. It does cost a little time, but frankly, not that many. If you work with good vendors, they should be able to, do this relatively efficiently in terms of giving you tools to look at or, to walk you through a live demo or at least, learn about your business and then share kind of open feedback on whether a technology like this is a good fit. I'm biased, but I'll, certainly if accounts payable is one of your most time consuming functions or other functions like expenses, procurement, and the such like that are time consuming functions for your team. If you're thinking of having to hire more people to manage these functions, as you add more suppliers, as you add more invoices, as you add more, divisions and subsidiaries around the globe, it's in your best interest to probably check this out and make sure that, you make the right investments for the business. It's certainly probably easier or more efficient, and more scalable to do more of this with technology than just having more bodies manage these processes over time. And particularly if you're going global and adding subsidiaries around the world, if you're thinking of having to add different staff to run these processes around the world, that exposes your business to fraud for sure. And so you do want controls in place as you go global for sure.
And you mentioned the word journey there, and I think it is important to highlight that any kind of digital transformation effort is a continuously evolving journey. It's not just, hey, we're going to get this tech project over the line, that it's business as normal. So how do you, Tipalti, ensure that your automation tools remain adaptable and suitable for those varying needs of companies at different stages of growth? I mean, we've mentioned planning for IPO, but there are so many different stages as well. Anything you can share around them?
Yeah. So, I mean, we are purpose built for those scaling companies. There's other companies out there that are focused on large enterprises or focused on small businesses. And, if you explore even the B2B software landscape, let's even park finance technology. Usually businesses are made for those three stages of company. In our case, we are made for those fast growing, scaling mid-sized companies, generally are companies aspiring to be that in the future and then beyond. And so to design a product to be successful in that space, it's quite difficult. There's only a few companies who've been successful at that. So you have to be focused on that stage, and then you have to build your technology and your services to kind of provide a balance of breadth, depth, and simplicity. Because these companies tend to be modern in terms of mindset, modern in terms of how they use things. Their employees tend to be, many of them, like, for example, in England, are based in London. In America, many of them would be based in certain, tech or VC oriented hubs that we're focusing on. And so you have to build both your service experience and your product experience to deliver on that kind of tricky balance between breadth, depth, and simplicity. That means having technology that can scale with you over the course of time, be adaptable to a changing company. And if you can pull it off, then you can win that space from a business perspective. I think we have achieved that, but there's still work to be done, right? We're not perfect, but we generally, if you go on the web and you search Tipalti reviews, we consistently have 4.5 to 5-star reviews across multiple different rating sites. We have about 99% customer retention. So that's the best. I worked at NetSuite for many years before, GE and Intuit and the such. It's the best retention I've ever seen. It was one of the reasons I actually joined the company 9 years ago, because that to me sounded like word of mouth and, a good customer experience. We do, as there's the product side of it, which I've talked about, and then there's the services side of it. So we do focus a lot the buyer journey, making sure that's a very positive experience. Even if they don't buy, at least they've learned from the process and it was positive, because maybe they're not ready for technology like this now, but they are 2 years from now. And so we want to make sure that experience is good. And then beyond the customer journey, we have to make sure that's good. So every customer has an implementation manager to guide them through the process. Frankly, we do most of the work of implementation. It's not a lot of work. It's not like an ERP system. Implementation takes about 2 months in this business. Typically an ERP is 6 to 12 months. I think people think that everything is like an ERP implementation. ERP is a different technology and it's just a lot more challenging to get implemented. But we try and make our version of implementation as easy as possible with implementation managers or onboarding managers. After the account's implemented, that you have access to real-time support in your region, as well as customer success teams. So we put a lot of investment in making sure the customer experience is good. And I think that all between the product and then the service experience leads to that really strong retention rate over the course of time, which means we're basically scaling with companies because we're working with fast growing companies. And so they're naturally growing their employee base, their invoice, their supplier, their regional distribution and such like that. And so we've been very successful in retaining and growing with them, which that's led to our company's success. So that's key to our own success is customer retention.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights with me today. And the world of finance, if you're outside of that space, it can be considered a little bit dry and very serious. But you're someone that you're talking to me in San Francisco today. You've lived in London and worked in Europe, etc. I suspect you have picked up a few stories along the way. Some you'll be able to share, some you can't. But can you share the funniest or most interesting story that has happened to you in your career?
Yeah, I mean, I would say this isn't the funniest or most interesting story I'm sure you've heard on this podcast, but I do think it's insightful. When I joined the company 9 years ago, in the interview with our CEO, Ken, he asked me, and I was interviewing at the time as the CMO for the company, And he still brings this up. Literally, I was in Toronto last week. We have a major office in Toronto, and he brought it up in the context of some other business conversation. And so he asked the question, how do you know you're right? Marketers tend to be very intuitive in terms of their approach to business. And so he asked, how do you know you're right with your recommendations? And I said, frankly, I don't. I'm probably right 50 to 60% of the time. But what you need to do is you have to build a structure in the business. In that case, in the context was marketing, where you can you try things, you test things, you measure things, and then you learn what worked and what didn't. You modify it. So I might be right 50, 60% of the time. At least if the other 40 to 50% of the time where I've made the wrong decision, we implemented things in a way that were test and learn, and then you can iterate and improve. Then you can scale a business in a profitable, sustainable way. That's how we run this entire business at this point, and that really resonated with Ken, and he still brings it up to this day. And we keep trying to work on it and make sure we're running the business in a responsible way. But I think it's just a good insight into how we run our business, but also I think how to run a effective, not only a fast growing business, but a business that's has a path to profitability that's efficient. All the metrics we all have to hit nowadays, CAC and payback and rule of 40 and all that fun stuff. If you have that test and learn mindset, you both innovate, but you also fine tune the machine constantly. So I thought that would be, that's interesting.
It really is. What a great moment to end the podcast on. So many insights in that one story. And for anyone listening, maybe you want to find out more about Tipalti, dig a little bit deeper in there, maybe connect with you or your team, ask a few questions. Where would you like to point everyone listening?
So tipalti.co.uk or Tipalti. If you go into Google, just type in Tipalti, Tipalti. A strange word, but if you type that in, you'll get our website. You'll find review sites so you can see what customers think of us. But if you go on the website, you can kind of schedule a demo. And from there, you'll talk to an expert in our technology to kind of learn to see if our product is a good fit for you. And at minimum, you'll just learn about the space and the technology that's out there. And from there, if it sounds like it's a fit for your business, we can do a tailored demo for you to see, so you can see the product in action and, see if it meets your needs.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, shining a light on the fact that excessive manual processes within finance teams are impacting growth and recovery. And some of those examples, like 42 minutes on average to process a single supplier invoice and the impacts of that, but also for exploring the barriers to automation, what has been holding CFOs back, but also understanding the strategic value of it and how we can all move forward together. So much gold, and you even had time to leave us with a great story. But more than anything, just thank you for sharing that with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Neil. I enjoyed it, so appreciate your time.
So after a deep dive into the strategic value of finance automation today, I think it's clear that the journey to an IPO can be as efficient as the systems we put in place. Automation seems to be the gateway to not only surviving, but thriving in that competitive IPO landscape. But what are your thoughts on integrating automation into your financial operations? Is this the game changer that you've been waiting for your business's growth and preparing for IPO and IPO readiness? As always, you know the drill. Share your views with me by emailing me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, just @NeilCHughes. I am officially waiting to start that conversation with you. But if not, have no fear. I'm not giving up that easy. I will be back in my podcasting chair bright and early tomorrow with another guest, another topic, and hopefully we'll have that conversation then. But that's it for today. So thanks for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.